Greetings survivors and friends, SHADOWFRAX here with your weekly Rust update, and being the first one of the month, that means some big changes to the terrain. I'm currently standing on one of these new blots on the landscape because, just as threatened, a selection of new water well monuments have now arrived to grace us with their presence. As you can see, they're breaking from the usual mould by being modelled to look like player-made monuments or decayed bases. You'll find about 10 to 12 of them scattered around a normal-sized map, and they're currently limited to arid and temperate biomes only. Each one has a working well that can provide as much of the wet stuff as you fancy. Just run up to one and give the handle a good old cranking. Each time you do this, 50 ml of water will be dumped into the barrel at the side, and if you're interested, the energy cost is 5 calories per pump, which is actually fairly good exercise. Up until now, the only other place to get a drinky in the wild has been the rivers of the island, of course, which, to be honest, haven't exactly looked that appetizing for a while, unless you're into green smoothies. Well, in this update, they've now magically turned it to a more appealing blue hue, so that's a refreshing change. Talking of refreshing changes, the military tunnels under the island have had quite a big one. There's definitely a lot more going on here now, with new structures, debris, and barrels of Mountain Dew, by the looks of it. These changes are in readiness for the imminent arrival of scientists on the island, who incidentally still aren't quite ready for work, although they have learned to open doors and break down barricades this week, so those PhDs weren't for nothing, thank goodness. They will be hanging out in the tunnels as a matter of course, and this is only a first pass at these areas, it seems, with more detail to be added possibly at a later time. Outside, in a bid to make the map a bit more uppy-downy, some first steps have been taken to increase the verticality of the landscape by adding what the commit log describes as huge rocks. You'll find a lot more cliffs and hills now, especially in the temperate and arctic biomes, plus some extra rock clusters on hilltops. And apparently this is only the beginning, so will we eventually get something akin to the old legacy-style rock formations? Hope so. In other changes, abandoned trucks have been removed from the ice lakes in order to fix an exploit there. Apart from changes to our procedurals, fixed maps were also tarted up slightly, with loot tables and cave lighting on Happis being tweaked, and the Savas King of the Hill map receiving a new recycler, amongst other things. Incidentally, you'll also stumble upon one in the scrapyard now on normal maps, which kind of makes perfect sense, really. On Steam, you'll now see there are a shed load of achievements associated with the game. This is all thanks to Helk's efforts to flesh out the tutorial task list, i.e. help for noobs, and is one of the only remaining items on the first phase of the roadmap. These will be holding new players' hands for the early game, but if you're a veteran and would rather not be constantly nagged by Captain Obvious, there is now an actual option to turn these off in the menu. In addition to all these additions, a couple of things were removed this week too. Firstly, after wood was no longer required to craft sheet metal doors, and 2 times 0 is still 0, double sheet metal doors have now followed suit. And sadly, maybe for some, pillar building blocks were erased from existence. The reasoning was that A, they weren't being used much, and B, they had significant disadvantages in terms of upkeep. They did of course offer a lot of stability for the amount of room they took up, and to atone for this, wall frames now offer the same stability as walls, and some conditional models for these will be added in the near future, which should look a bit more aesthetic. In performance this week, a problem with easy anti-cheat was identified, which was causing certain memory from the page file to be continuously loaded into physical RAM. This was something that obviously didn't help users with low memory, but now this is fixed, the game requires significantly less of it. Network interpolation and extrapolation is a set of big boy words which explain how positions of moving entities, such as cars for instance, can differ slightly between client and server. In this shot of a car moving at full speed, the solid one is what the server's seeing, and the ghost is where the client thinks it is. Well, after some rewrites this week, here's the improvement, and as you can see, the sedan is having far less of an out-of-chassis experience. Not only that, but after these changes, delays between positions of players and entities on servers and what each individual client sees were tightened up. This helps out massively with the thing called Peeker's Advantage, for instance, where it can sometimes feel like another player is able to kill you around a corner. Do check out the dev blog if you want more details on this one. In fixes this week, both players and monuments should now only spawn in locations that have a walkable path to the mainland instead of out to sea on a tiny island. Hair shaders are being tweaked to make everything look more seamless and natural, and this should help out especially when playing in potato mode, and attempts are underway to mitigate shadows disappearing when culling is enabled, and this should already be looking a bit better. In works in progress, the new tree models, which I just know you're gagging to get your hands on are finished and fully functional, but had to be delayed this week sadly. Here are some pickies showing temperate and snow-covered versions, and I think they'll be worth the wait. The only thing holding them up is billboard generation, which is used to depict distant models, and a system which is compatible with the new designs is currently being developed. View model clothing is almost finished. The bulk of the work now is to try to hide seams and smooth out some of the skinning, as any rough edges will be quite literally in your face at this range. Hopefully not too much longer on that. All the sounds in the game are getting another pass to finalise the mix before leaving early access. This is just to make sure volume levels and equalisation are as standardised and balanced as possible, and there's progress on the chainsaw model, which I showed you art for recently. The biggest challenge here is to make the chain look realistic without having to add a ridiculous amount of detail, but a solution for this has been found which basically makes it one continuous mesh and does the job with far less overhead. Now this is done, texturing can be focused on, and we should soon be able to get our greasy paws on it and start cutting down those new trees. Lastly, a member of the team is leaving. Gooseman, who did some amazing work modelling, rigging, animating and creating particle and sound effects for many of the tools and weapons we have in game, is heading off to pastures new, and he will be missed. But what this does mean is that Facepunch are hiring, so if you can fill his still smoking shoes, you might want to apply. Link is on the dev blog. Just to reiterate what I said in the last update, next week is when Rust leaves early access, and there will be another forced map and BP wipe at that point, but to all intents and purposes, nothing much is going to change as far as my updates are concerned. Although patches to the game will be monthly from now on, there will still be a weekly dev blog, and I will still be producing one of these videos every week as per, so do stay tuned to keep up to date. Leave me a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Come and join my stables on Twitch, Twitter, Facebook and the Steam group, and I shall catch you all soon, but in the meantime, keep calm and stay rusty. Cheerio.